Hi everyone! A lot of people ask how to make the famous sabaya, and there's not a lot of detailed description on YouTube showing you how to make this. So if you would like to know how to make this gorgeous fluffy sabaya, please keep watching. To get started, you will need 1 pound of butter, 5 eggs, a plastic covering or any type of wrap, carnation milk or regular milk if you don't have any, 1.5 cup of Aunt Jemima flour, which is pretty hard to find in supermarkets, so you have to look around, 7 cups of all-purpose flour, which I buy from Costco in a bulk, 2 cups of water, 1 teaspoon of black seeds, which you can purchase at any Arabic store or supermarket, and 1 tablespoon of salt. Lastly, vegetable oil for the end coating. To get started, we will melt our 1 pound of butter on medium heat. While that is going to melt, we will then start to heat up 5 eggs into warm water. Once the butter starts to melt, you're just going to keep swirling it around and around, and as it starts to heat, it's going to start to bubble, and you just keep stirring and stirring. To prep my countertop, I am taking an all-purpose flour and just spreading that all over the surface of the plastic before making the dough. We're starting to see that light brown colored bubbles forming, and we're looking for that golden color. So you keep stirring until you get that result. And once you've finished, you set that aside for later. The last step that we're doing for setting aside our ingredients is our egg milk mixture for the end coat. This is 1 egg yolk and a little bit of carnation milk just to get that consistency like you're seeing. You can also use regular milk if you don't want to get too fancy. Now let's start making the dough. I've added 4 eggs and I'm adding in the 1 tablespoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of the black seeds, which I've accidentally already dropped in some. And now for the actual flour, I'm adding in the 2 types of flour, the Aunt Jemima as well as the all-purpose flour. And we're adding the 7 of the all-purpose, 1.5 of the Aunt Jemima. If you would like, you can replace the Aunt Jemima with yeast, but you would have to wait for it to rise.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Now I'm going to add 4 cups of warm water, and you don't want it to be too hot. You want it more closer on the cooler side, and then you're just gonna go ahead and just use your hands to mix it. If you have a dough mixer, you can also use that, but it's just very important to gather it slowly, and then if you need to add more water to make it a little bit more thick, you can. Otherwise, you just keep stirring and stirring until you receive a huge dough. Now it's time to use the melted butter that we did in the very beginning, and I'm adding in 3 spoonfuls of the melted butter, and I added a tablespoon, and this is basically going to make the dough very moist, and it just smells so amazing right now, and it adds the tenderness to the dough. And once you finish with your whole dough, the texture should be like this, bouncing back and forth, yet still sticky. I went ahead and put a little bit of vegetable oil on a little small bowl, and we're basically using this small bowl to create our layers. And you're gonna start by grabbing a little small piece of the dough that we made, and you're gonna coat it onto this little bowl, and enough to make it perfect. You're just folding it back and forth to make it even and perfectly smooth. This step is really hard to master, so if you don't get it the first time, just keep trying. Then we're placing it onto the countertop that we prepared with flour, and you're basically gonna continue this entire step by repeating until your entire dough is completely finished, and that the entire countertop is filled with the entire dough. If you don't have a countertop and a space that you can do this, you can always fill a huge bowl and coat it with oil and then cover it with saran wrap. The whole purpose is trying to cover it in order for it to rise. And once we've completed the entire step, it should look like this. Our last step into completing the layers is basically taking some vegetable oil and soaking them with your fingers, putting light pressure in order so they can start to flatten. And pretty much what this is doing is preparing the layers, and then you're going to take a plastic cover, which is at the end, and you're going to completely cover it so that no air is coming through in order for them to rise. And Basically, this is gonna prepare the layers. I like to also press down a little bit on each of the layers in order for the plastic to adhere. And you leave it covered for about 10 minutes. Now it's time for the scary part of the meal. So the butter that we melted in the very beginning, we're taking half of that, only half, and we're mixing in with the same amount of vegetable oil. You can just pretty much eyeball this. You don't have to have exact measurements. And if you don't want to use the vegetable oils, you can just use the entire melted butter. So in order to prep my pan, I'm taking an 18-inch pizza pan and I'm just sprinkling in some of that butter mixture to the bottom of the plate so nothing sticks, and I'm adding in some flour just like you would as if you're making pizza. And once you completed that, you set that on the side. After each of the dough piece has loosened and sat for a few minutes, you're basically going to want to flip each of them inside out so that each layer is coated with flour. And the reason being is that you want it to be easily manageable, and if it's too sticky, we won't be able to completely flip each layer. I highly suggest you have well-groomed and clean arms because sabaya is pretty much a handmade dish. Once you slap it onto the pan, you just want to slightly take the edges and spread them onto the pan. As you can see, it's okay if it rips because you really want to create volume by pulling each of the layers and adding some air inside. I know this sounds crazy, but this is what makes it great. So this is the crazy part where we're adding in that oil butter mixture, and we're pretty much doing this to each single layer. So this is the final look after you finish all your layers. You should get this puffy outcome where you do see bubbles, and you're gonna start to see about 2 inches drooping from the corners and the sides of the edges because we have let it sit for a few minutes, and you want this so that it doesn't get too heavy. We will be cutting half of that, as you can see, because the sabaya has a lot of weight on the top, and cutting the whole thing can actually cause the sabaya to fall apart. So since there's a lot of leftover, you can actually rip all these pieces and make a whole new sabaya, which is what we did because it was Eid. If not, you can also just deep fry them. You can make like any sort of khubz like on the pan. There's so many things you can pretty much do with this dough. After chopping half of the edges, you can start your whole new layers for your new sabaya, and you would just basically repeat the entire thing from the beginning. Before I cut the whole leftover of the edges, I am cutting very thin pieces in order to design the sabaya. This isn't necessary, but it completes the look. And you're gonna basically coat those layers with the leftover flour, and you're gonna just keep rolling it in your hands, or you can use a roller until it becomes very skinny. You don't want it too thin because it can burn once you cook it. So I'm pretty much gonna make 8 of these, and by this time you want to start to preheat your oven at 375 degrees. After I finish rolling my lines, I just place them diagonally, and you can use any design setup that you like, but this is pretty much our traditional way. So you're just gonna add 4 going straight and then 4 the opposite, and it just creates this really elegant look. And after, I'm just gonna braid the edges. Before I continue the design, I'm just going around with the scissors and just cutting off any of the excess after I placed my lines. You just want a nice clean cut and clean edges. To continue completing the designing of our sabaya, you're just gonna run a little bit of oil on your fingers, and we're pretty much creating a braid along the side of the edges. You're pretty much just pressing and then folding the corner of the plate, and you're just gonna repeat that until the entire sabaya is completed. And remember, not everyone does this. Every place in Yemen pretty much has their own way of doing sabaya. Some just do it flat. Some people have it puffy. As you can see, ours is really puffy. And that's the unique part about it. Everyone has their own way. And This is our way because we just like it to look pretty and well presented once we actually serve it. And you can see the ending once you see it from the sides. It looks very bubbly because each layer we kind of puffed it out. If you want to just keep it flat, you just keep it flat. Lastly, we're just adding in that egg milk mixture that we set aside in the very beginning. And you want to be very gentle because they can easily pop because the layers are so fragile. So once you completed that, this is how it looks before it's cooked and once we finished the preparation. And we're just pretty much gonna put it in the oven, and once it comes out we have our very delicious sabaya, which you can serve after any meal as a dessert, or you can just serve it with tea, but honey is definitely a must on top of it. So there you have it. If you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, let me know in the comments below on what Yemeni dish you would like me to do next.